Okay, this is Photographic Communications and Foundations, and we're going to talk about how the photograph works and how we take pictures and create good images. First, we need to know a little bit about the photos. The reason we take photos is because they convey a message using your pictures. You've heard the phrase that a picture speaks 1,000 words, and that's true. You can go to any country and look at a photograph and be able to speak the language of the photograph. You can't say that with words. It's very hard to communicate if you don't understand the language. But if you show a picture of a stop sign, just the symbol itself, somebody is going to understand it. If you show a picture of a child and a mother, you're going to understand what's going on in that photo. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It conveys the same message. So we're going to learn how to take photos and what the difference between photographic communication is and photography and just plain old having fun with your cameras. The difference between the different areas is one's for recreation while the other ones are trying to exchange information. When you go to the basketball games, football games, and you take a selfie, that is not photographic communication, that is not photography. Again, that's just you having fun with the camera. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to learn to set up the camera and plan your photo shoot. So you have to spend time thinking about it, researching where you're going to do things, what the message will come across in your photo, so you have a decent image. Okay, so that's kind of the difference between photography and just having fun with your camera. Is planning, and that's huge. Okay, let's learn a little bit about the light. Okay, light is very important for photography because if you're thinking about photography as some sort of a business or having fun with it, you've got to understand where it's coming from. Okay, there's three characteristics: the amplitude, the wavelength, and the direction. Okay, by understanding where they're coming from, the light is coming from, you'll start to understand what the pictures will look like. Because some of us have taken photos and we are completely dark in the image, but everything around us is light. Or we're looking at the sun and we're squinting and we still take a photo and it's a bad photo because we were squinting in the photo and our faces, or the people in the picture, the faces were washed out. So we've got to understand where you're coming from. Most people will get out at around noon, go to try to take a photo, and the sun's right above them. That creates a shadow on your eyes, which makes it look like you have bags on your eyes. So understanding direction and where it's coming from is huge in the field of photography. Now let's look at the characteristics of it. We said there's three parts: the amplitude, wavelength, and direction. The amplitude is the height of the wave. This is the strength of the wavelength, how strong it is. Okay, it's measured from the middle of it. If you look on the right side of that little image, it goes from the middle to the crest of the wave. You guys remember in science class you have the crest and you have the trough. That is the two parts that make up one wavelength. Then we have the second component, which is wavelength. This determines the color. Okay, each color has its own wavelength. So if the wavelength is, again, it's kind of like the little S curve. It starts in the middle of the wave, goes up to the crest, comes down the middle again, and down all the way to the trough, which is the bottom part, and back up to the middle. That is one wavelength. Okay, the wavelength here in the image, I showed you the differences of the colors. We see that here's the color spectrum. The shorter wavelengths are your blues and your purples, and then your more intense wavelengths are your reds. It goes up through the yellows, through the oranges, to your reds. Those are the more intense wavelengths. So this is kind of just give you an idea. The different wavelengths determine kind of where you are on the color spectrum. Okay. Now, of these, we still have to do have 3 special steps. I told you in the unit before that we have Special Agent OSO has 3 steps, and it still continues. First, we need to come up with an idea. What are we going to take a picture of? That is designing our message. You can't just go take a camera and start snapping photos. You kind of can, but you're going to come up with 1,000 photos, and then you have to go find out what are you going to do with them. If you already have the idea, you can say, okay, I want to go take pictures of the memorial that is by Pitt State, and I want a nice picture of all the flags. Great idea. You can go and take 20 photos and come back with the ones you need. Whereas you say, I'm just going to go start taking pictures, you have no idea what you're going to take pictures of, and then you have to spend a lot of time taking and looking through all your photos. So the best thing is always start with an idea, then you come up with taking the photos, which is very simple. I'm going to teach you how to take good photos. You can use this in your personal life. You can go through and take it to other classes, for example, journalism, newspaper, the yearbook, all those classes you'll need to take good photos. So it's a good thing you're here because you're going to start taking some nice photos. The last step is to edit them, and we'll go through that process and then print them. 3 special steps: come up with a message, take the photos, and then print them. Okay, when we design messages, again, we're thinking of ideas. We need to think of several techniques, and I'm going to show you more techniques in class, but some of these are just very simple to come across. Some are more difficult. So we compose our messages to make them more 3D. You want to get different angles. The main thing in photography is we want one point of interest. We don't want to have several things going on in a photo to draw our eye away from the main concept. So the main goal is to come up with one point of interest or emphasis. Okay, we'll use distance and scope to add some interest and some color to help communicate our message as well. Distance and scope, here's an example. If we look at this top photo, you really don't know what's going on. If you kind of took your eye away from the picture and back on, your eye might go 2 spots. First, my eye goes down to that big log down below. Okay. Secondly, then it goes up to the sky. And then if it wandered some more, it'd go over to the trees, which most of those have no impact on what the message should be. Now, if we zoomed in a little bit, which is the bottom photo, your eye directly goes to the mountain that it should have been in the first place. So now that is a good reason when we want to get close to our object as possible. If you've been in, most of you have had your picture taken by some professional at some point in time. If they ever taken a picture of you personally, they might have gotten really close and very uncomfortable. There's a reason they're very close. Close is always better. You get less background, less distractions. You have one focus instead of, if you zoomed out, you'd have all the background noise to worry about. Trash cans, dirt, could be a little squirrel in the background. So you get all those nice photobombed photos if you didn't zoom in. So always come close to your image, and you're going to get a better photo in it. Okay, we do not expose the film, but I want to go over it just because we are switching to what we call digital. But we used to have film that was exposed in the camera. Now it's digital sensors, little sensor chip in the back of the camera that exposes the pictures. Okay, so basically we have a box that has a sensitive material, which is now our digital sensors, inside the box. When we hit the shutter, which opens the lens, it lets light through to hit the sensor. Very simple concept. A box that's dark with a pinhole that allows light to come through. Perfect. Now, here's the main parts that you need to understand for the camera. And I'm going to show examples in class about this, so you might be able to get both of these hands-on in class and understand the definitions of these as well. The shutter is what opens the lens so light can come through. It's almost like if you're at home, you have the shutters on your house. You open them up, light comes through. Okay, we measure that in amount of time. Now then there's the aperture, which is controlled, or the measurement is the f-stops. So f-stops are what's again the amount of light that is able to come through. So we open the aperture up by a certain f-stop value. That allows the amount of light to come through. Okay, so if we have a bigger hole in our lens, more light will come through. Now here's the tricky part about apertures and f-stops. The lower the number, for example f1.8, so it's an f-stop of 1.8, has a larger hole than if it was an f32. So it's the opposite. The smaller the f-stop, the bigger the opening. The larger the f-stop, the smaller the opening. So if we had too much light coming through, and if we had to change the f-stop value, too much light, we would close the aperture with a larger f-stop value. So that means less light will come through with the amount of time the shutter is open. Okay, and then the focal length is determined by the lens. We have several lenses that we'll use in class. There's lenses for zooming, there's lenses to get up close, macro lenses so you can get really close, and there's telephoto lenses that you can get on the, like if you look at the side of the football fields, professional games, they have these 3-foot long lenses, and they're about 8 to 10 inches in diameter. Those are, again, pretty good focal lens, so they can actually go in and get the action without having to be on the field. So a lens is a pretty powerful deal. But if you look, the main two things we're going to worry about this year is f-stop and the shutter. Okay, digital photography, we're getting into the digital age. Most of you guys understand this, and I need to change this. It's not tiny dots. Pixels are actually tiny squares. If you zoomed in, if you kind of look on that right side photo, those are squares. That's a pixel. So we construct all our photos with pixels. Okay. When we print them, we're going to measure them in dots per inch. So DPI is dots per inch. When you get on the computer, it's going to be PPI, which is pixels per inch, until we print them, which is dots per inch. So that's kind of clarifying the two, PPI and DPI. Okay, but digital pictures are made up of pixels. One of the last things I want to go over is law of thirds. Law of thirds is very, very important in the world of photography. If you look at the bottom left photo, we have the tic-tac-toe grid, and then the right photo we have the tic-tac-toe grid. The main thing that you notice on these, the main subject should, 99.9% of the time, there are always exceptions to the rules, the eyes should be 2/3 up. So if your eyes are 2/3 up on the grid, you're doing pretty good with your photo. Now if I look at some of the photos my in-laws have taken, and if you listen to this, it's true. I'm talking to my in-laws. If they ever listen to this, that's fine. But most of the time my head's cut off, or I'm in the middle of the photo where my eyes are right dead center in the middle of the photo. Those aren't very good photos. So what your goal is to get your eyes 2/3 up. If you have 2/3 up, you're not cutting off the head. You're not in the middle of the photo where you have all this extra space above you. So 2/3 up is the goal for the eyeballs. Now if you look on the bottom left one, the guy's right in the center. Now this is very symmetrical. I would only do this if you're doing headshots or if you're doing some corporate picture. Centered really doesn't look the best. in my opinion. It's too symmetrical. In the world of art, we kind of like to get away from symmetrical things, which is, again, right down the center. So what I try to do is I try to put my eyes on one of the grids where they crisscross. So on one of the thirds, so the left third or the right third, if they are looking away from you, for example, the picture on the right, the 2/3, there's 2/3 lead room. So if you look at the girl that's welding, she is looking away, and I'm putting her on the right third, so she has 2/3 lead room to the left of her. That's a proper photo. Again, these aren't photography like artsy pictures. These are just common photos. To make good photos, you use the law of thirds, and we also call that the tic-tac-toe method. Now, I just kind of want you to understand that photography is not going away. It's getting more and more popular with everybody, since everybody has nice little iPhones, and the cameras are getting cheaper. So there's jobs out there. Again, it's a tough market. However, I'm going to emphasize on the commercial and industrial photography. There's a lot of people out there that think photography only exists with the places like FX Studio, Bishop's Photography. You know a bunch of them here in Pittsburgh. Now that's the portrait photography. There's a ton out there in commercial and industrial photography. I had a friend that he worked for National Geographic and traveled the world. All he did was went around and took photos of a lot of different cultures and concepts that were going on. He lived basically driving around taking photos of wildlife. Again, people just interacting in their normal day life down in Africa. He had a great, he enjoyed it. So that is part of the industry. Then if you look at any magazine that you look at has photos. Every website has photos. There are pictures everywhere that they have to be taken. You can't go to Google when you own a business, can't go to Google and just take pictures without paying for them. So either you pay for them that somebody else did, or you hire a photographer to go out and take the photos that you want. And very good industry, but you got to have an eye for it. So we're going to teach you how to have the eye for it and how to use the camera to take good photos. So hope you enjoyed it. Again, we're going to demonstrate in class so you know how to use the camera and then start taking your photos. Thanks for listening.